Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Hands on SAP Dev with me, DJ Q Macro. Welcome everyone. Special welcome to Martin Stenzig, who is being in Europe for a few weeks, has advantages. Welcome, Martin. Great to have you. Great to have you. And of course, great to have everybody else as well. Good morning, Can. And Helmut, good morning to you. Srinivas, good morning to you. And also E, good morning and welcome back. Welcome back, E. So, I'm very happy to be here on Friday with you all. We're going to do some digging a little bit more into the OAuth flow that we looked at last week, but maybe a bit slower and in a bit more detail, because I think it's important to get the foundations right. There's no point in my brain, there's no point in progressing if you built on shaky ground, you're not understanding the stuff that you're standing on top of. So that's what we're going to do. What else have we got for you? In fact, I've just got the URL. I've just published it. Actually, I noticed it was still private. I've just published it. The SAP Weekly Developer News. So check that out. There's the URL. And I don't think there's many other things that we need to do. I can hear some noise in the background. I was wondering if everything's okay. Yeah, it's all good. Got my mum and my other sister staying with us this weekend, seeing my grandma. Good morning to Mark in Hamburg. First time in office since ages. Just here for the second vaccination. Very good, Mark. Get that vaccination in. I've got my coffee, and it's a very apt coffee cup again today. Hands on SAP Dev cup with my OAuth at 8 a.m. Thanks to Alex Ellis. I've got my Stormtrooper waffle. I've already eaten half of it. And over here, before I forget, if you do have any desire for stickers, we've got plenty of these developers.sap.com stickers, and still quite a few left of these Hands on SAP Dev stickers. So if you want some, let me know privately, of course. Don't share your address on the interwebs. Send me a direct message or something. Contact me with your address, and I'll post some to you. So there we go. So let's get started, shall we? Let me move into the main scene. That was just me bringing the YouTube video URL. Where are we going to start? We're going to start, I think, there's this week's developer news. It's quite a quiet week this week. The news is only 5 minutes long. There's 3 slots. We had a special first of hopefully a few special slots from our fellow community advocates. I'm quite excited. So many of you who will know Menina Chow, colleague of mine from developer relations team. If you watched TechEd 2020, Menina was one of the anchors. Is that the right word to use? On channel 1 of TechEd, which was awesome. So in this particular news episode, you'll see, practice my pointing. In this particular news episode, there, like that, you'll see Menina. So Mark says, regarding auth, most examples are missing the full life cycle, including storing refresh token. Let's do that as well. The refresh token. Now, that reminds me, Mark, that's a great question, and let's try and get to that. Yeah, let's take our time, even if we don't get to much of the actual OData stuff. We'll at least cover the OAuth stuff today. So, where we're going to start from is where we started from last week, which is this authentic. We're not going to go through it again. Don't worry. We're not going to go through the code again. I do want to use some of the code that Chaim has provided us with just to kickstart us into the flow, right? So we're gonna look at the code here and then start building it and doing it all manually. Sort of from underneath. Now, the refresh token, Mark, that reminds me, I did have a look. OAuth RFC. OAuth RFC, yeah, OAuth RFC, there we go. Authorization code grant types. That'll do. And I think in here, we're not going to read through this together, but I think this is quite a useful, let me just share this with you anyway. It's a super useful RFC. And it's got a couple of diagrams in it. We've got the refresh token here somewhere. Refresh token, there's refresh token covered there. Oh, there we go. This was one of the diagrams that I wanted to bring up here. But before there was another. I was looking at this earlier this week. There we go. Okay. So this will inform what we're going to do today. The protocol flow. And we'll go back to Chaim's auth.js code shortly. Let me just get rid of... I was wondering why my keyboard wasn't working. I've hit the Bluetooth key that has assigned it to some other... There you go. Right, so there we go. We're going to look at Chaim's auth.js very briefly to get some clues as to what the flow is. And we covered this last week a little bit when we were debugging through in VS Code, but it was a little bit sort of even doing it slowly. To my brain, it was still a little bit like, well, what's going on? So that's what we're going to try and do today. Clarify that. But before we start looking at the code and doing it ourselves, let's just remind ourselves of the authorization code flow. So we know it's the authorization code flow. We covered that last week. And the authorization code flow is where a human is involved. Okay, a resource owner. Okay, there's also the client credentials flow or grant. Sometimes they call it grants, right? Which is where a service, an application can act on its own behalf, has its own credentials, and there's no human involved. But this is very much where a human is involved. And that's important for very, many reasons from an SAP Graph perspective. But let's just check out this protocol flow here. We've got the client, which is us in this case. This is Chaim's auth.js, the whole hello quotes thing that he's got there. So this whole thing, let me just do that in a separate thing. So Chaim's program here, the thing that sort of shows this, is the client. And there are three things, and I think this is what where we're starting from. We first of all have to say, hey, do you as the resource owner, and it's going to be me in this case, djadams@sap.com, grant access to this client, the hello quotes program? Yes or no? And I have to authenticate, and then what happens is the authorization server sends back a code, an authorization grant, to the client, and the client has to use that. It's quite a short-lived code. Hey, Santiago, welcome. Welcome, Santiago. It's quite a short-lived code that has to be used then to be exchanged for an access token. So the flow is the client sends me, the human, to authenticate and to say yes or no, implicitly in this case, do you grant authorization? And that authorization grant comes back in the form of a code. Okay, it's quite a short code. We saw that last week. Then the client has to take that code and say, hey, I've got a grant here. Please give me, in exchange for this grant code, I'm now allowed to have an access token. Can I have one, please? And so that is this thing here, number C, authorization grant, goes to the authorization server. The authorization server checks that the resource owner has said yes, and the scope and whatever, if there is a scope, sends back an access token. But not just to Mark's point here, not only does it send back an access token, but it also sends back an idea of how long that access token is valid for. And because it's not valid forever, it also sends a refresh token that the client can then use to say, hey, my token's about to run out, or my token has run out, please give me another. And we don't have to involve the human again to ask again. And that's this other diagram down here. Okay, where was it? There we go. So we authorization grant, we get, so that's like the second part of the previous diagram, authorization grant. The authorization server returns the access token and the refresh token, right? Hey, Samuele, Hawkeye, good morning. Good morning to you. And then the client happily uses the access token to access the resources, to access the SAP Graph endpoints, in this case. Call this, call that, call that. It's all fine. We're using the access token, but all of a sudden, you know, hours later, a few moments later, hours later, or whatever. Oh, Mark says, do you have a new microphone? The sound is crystal clear, almost surround sound. Amazing. No, I've still got this same mic. I'm not sure whether you can. I'm going to tilt my screen because I'm going to fall off. But I've got the same mic. It's a Blue Yeti mic. But thank you. That's good. So, Srinivas, what was that? If the authentication fails at the resource owner, is the grant still given? Which fails? No. If the authentication fails, if the resource owner, as in me, DJ in this case, if I fail to authenticate, then I don't even get to the stage where I can say, yes, I grant access, or no, I do not grant access. We don't even get that far. Okay, so there's no code that's sent back. So the whole first step completely falls flat. Okay, hopefully that explains it, Srinivas. And I guess that makes sense. You know, there's no way that the human is going to get a chance to grant access or deny access. So, you know, let's fail there. Okay, let's fail safe. Hopefully that answers your question, Srinivas. Let me know if it does or doesn't. So, the client is merrily, happily accessing resources in SAP Graph. Or is it due to macOS 11.5 update? Oh, could be. I did have some awful problems yesterday. In fact, I tweeted and I thought, I'm always tweeting about the macOS upgrades and they're terrible. So I deleted the tweet. But yeah, I spent about more than half an hour trying to debug my networking because it had broken networking, the upgrade. It always breaks something. Anyway, but it's all fine now. Cool, okay. Thanks, Srinivas, for letting me know. So, at some stage, the access token is going to expire, okay? So, the resource server will then say, no way, this access token, I don't recognize it, invalid token. You're not having that resource. So the client says, aha, I can now refresh my access token because I've been given not only an access token when it was first granted to me, but also a refresh token. So I'm going to use my refresh token to say, please give me another access token. Okay. Guru, good afternoon. Welcome to you, Guru. Nice to have you here. So those are the three steps, basically: the authorization grant, the requesting of the access token, and then the refreshing of the access token. So, with that in mind, that's enough theory, isn't it? That's enough sort of stuff. So let's now work out and remind ourselves. Where is it? Remind ourselves. There's the auth. There's the auth of what we did. In the middleware that we got inserted into the Express framework, we had the. In fact, shall we look at it? Let's look at it in code. It might be better. So let's just go into here. Graph. No, not GraphQL. Examples. CD tutorials 03. Source. In the auth, there we go, in the auth, let's have a look at that. I've made my font a little bit bigger as well. Let me know if that helps. So down here, we had this get middleware, didn't we? Okay, so this whole get middleware section dealt with the whole sort of initial flow. And down here, on line 55, if we didn't have a token, this is where it kicked everything off. Okay, so it uses the auth URL, which is the authentication server. Let's go back to here. It's the authorization server, the URL of the authorization server, and it has this special path, OAuth authorize. Okay, and what it does is it was sending its. Let's just do a set wrap for a second. I've turned off set wrap so that if I do want to show you some credentials in a JSON file, I can chop it off so we can have a look at them together in comfort, but you don't see all the detail, right? So we can, because we want to share what we're doing, right? We don't want to sort of, blur it out or anything, so we can just chop it off. So the two things that get sent in the call to the OAuth authorize, in the part where we're requesting the authorization grant, effectively, the first step, as in, let's go back to the initial diagram. We're doing this bit. Okay, we're doing this bit. we send the client ID as an identifier. We send a redirect URI, as in where is the authorization server supposed to send the human back once the human, DJ, has granted access. Okay, so that's this redirect URI, and we're going to use localhost because we're just going to capture it in the browser, in the URL. But we also say, what am I trying to do here? I would like you to give me, in response, a code. Christian, good morning, Christian, and welcome. I would like you to give me a code, response type equals code. So let's do that bit first, okay? So given that, let's do it here. Let's have that up there. Let's just have a little bit. There we go. That's better. So let's create. What have we got in here? Yeah, there we go. Oh yes, that reminds me. So the other thing that Chaim said here. To programmatic access, a file containing credentials.json is created during the process. If you're interested in executing this tutorial, go and ask us for a credentials.json file to their test setup. Okay, so that's what I've done. That's what I encourage you to do as well. Right at the start, so you may have one of these. In fact, they've just bumped the version of this whole thing in the back end. This is still in beta, of course, SAP Graph, so you might hit some issues with the credentials files that you've already got if you do have one. So if you do, just ask them for another one, okay? That's what I did yesterday. And in fact, yeah, I've got my, where is it? Let's go back to here. I've got my, where is it? Credentials.json. There we go. There's my credentials.json file, which I got yesterday, right? I said, oh my goodness, this is not working anymore. So they gave me a new one. So in fact, let's have a look at it here. Vim, let's just make sure, set no wrap credentials.json. There we go. Perfect. Perfect. We've got a chopped off everything. Let's chop it off even more. So what's inside? So we can share. We can look at that together and not worry about me leaking any credentials, right? Inside the credentials.json, we've got two nodes. We've got the URI, which is the base URI for the actual resources, the SAP Graph resources, eu30.graph.sap/API. But then we've got UAA. We all know UAA as the short code for the authentication and authorization mechanism. And we've got various things in here, including the client ID, the client secret, and also the URL, the authorization server, the URL of this thing here, okay? So that is what we're going to need. Now, if anybody remembers, in fact, when we got this mug, if anybody remembers, we wrote this script ages ago called SKV, service key values, that we grabbed properties like this on the left-hand side from service key files, JSON files. I mean, but you can grab it from any JSON file. So I could say, for example, well, in fact, service key value, we're going to use, I'm explaining this because we're going to use this. Retrieve values, let's just zoom that in for a second. Retrieve values from service key. Example, there's the default file that it looks in is a file called key.json. So why don't we, there we go, yeah. Let's quit out of there. Let's go back into here. And we got there. Yeah, let's link, we create a symbolic link to my credentials file and call it key.json. So I can say now, because I've got SKV in my path, right? SKV, that's just this script here. Do we need that? No, let's get rid of that. Switch there. I can now say SKV and then have a look at, for example, URI. Let's look at URI. URI. There we go. So it just returns the value of that property. Just a really convenient, simple, convenient script. And I can say, what's the client ID? Okay, for example. So I can say SKV UAA.client ID. So we express the complete path, UAA.client ID. There we go, there's a client ID. So that's what we're going to use. Let's use that to start building up what we need here. So let's create a directory. Make dir auth stuff. cd auth stuff. Well, actually no. rmdir auth stuff. Let's just do it in here. So the first thing we want to do, new script. Let's have them like numbered as well. What is it? Request. Oh my biscuit. Authorization code grant. Auth grant. Okay. All we're going to do here is going to write a script that's going to generate a URL. Simple as that. So let's say URL equals. What's going on? There we go. Equals. Well, the first thing we want to do. What's going on with my keyboard? There we go. We want the value of the authentication server URL. So we want skv URL. Okay, but then we want, so that's the auth URL like above there, this thing here. Then we want OAuth authorize. Okay, and then what else do we want? We want the 3 query parameters. This is going to be a get, a URL get. Okay, so we want client ID as up here, client ID equals, and the client ID is going to be skv URL dot client ID. Yep, okay. And we also want and redirect underscore URL equals we need to, okay, yeah, I remember this. We also, because these are values to parameters, to query parameters in the query string, we need to make sure, normal URL rules, that they're URL encoded. And in fact, I've got a version skvu. I've got a version skvu that will just call skv and URL encode it. Okay, these are all in my dot files. If you look at the dot files, scripts, skv, where is it? skv and skvu. Okay, skvu will just call skv with the parameters you give it, and then URL encode the thing. So if I say skv uaa.url, for example. Link. Let's just create one. Oh, there we go. skv credentials. It'll give us that. However, if I say skvu, why is that not working? Maybe we don't need it. Okay, let's do that instead in a different way. What is that? That's interesting. Okay, readout URI equals URL encode. Let's just use encode. HTTP localhost, lolcat host. There we go, and that's that there. Oh no, we need one more thing, don't we? We need one more thing. We need the response type equals code. There we go. So that's that. So let's just say echo for now URL. Shall we see what that gives us? Let's bring that in here. Say one. Ooh, that's interesting. Null. That's not right, is it? Why is that null? skv URL. Oh, no. UAA.url, isn't it? There we go. Let's try that again. There we go. Okay, there we go. There we go. Client ID. Oh, see, client ID is also. I'm getting too excited. It's UAA.client ID, isn't it? There we go. Okay, so we also need, there we go. We can see here we've got the authentication server URL, OAuth, authorize, passing the client ID, which we need to URL encode, because we've got these exclamation marks and also pipes and everything. Ampersand, redirect URI going to localhost, and the response type equals code. Oh, Srinivas, about client ID and secret, I always thought that we use service instance, which is more like a server for consumer. Then shouldn't client ID and secret be called server ID and secret? Silly. I see what you're saying there. I think you could argue for either way. I get what you're saying. I think you could argue for either way. For me, it makes sense to be client because these are let's call them credentials. These are the credentials that you need to interact with that instance of the service. You could argue either way though. Hey Max, good morning to Max. Would have said that URL client is wrong, but was curious to see you failing. Oh, thanks, Max. Very good. Yeah, I'm good at failing, as in I fail a lot. But we also want to, let's just try that U thing again. Let's just make sure. I thought that worked before. Oh, it does. Okay, fine. Maybe I haven't taken into account the extra parameter there. Anyway, okay. So, that looks like a crazy incantation, right? But that is the incantation that exactly was being done by Chaim's auth.js here. This.auth URL, OAuth, authorize, client ID equals encode URI. There we go. There's a URL encoding. Redirect URI, URL encoded redirect URI, and also response type equals code. So that's the first thing we do. So let's do that. Now, instead of copy pasting this, I've recently found a command line way of opening up. I mean, you can say open, but I want to open something in an incognito window. We want to open this in a browser. And I use Brave because it doesn't automatically use my SAP laptop credentials like Chrome does. So that's great for this sort of thing. So I can say Brave CLI. Well, let's try this. Let me show you what this does. Brave CLI open qmacro.org. So if I do that, it'll open up a website. Okay, fine. Let's close that again. But I can say Brave CLI open, and then we'll just call that code one underscore, what is it called? One underscore, what does it call it? Request auth grant. So the output of that URL, but minus I open it up in an incognito mode. So we're about to do this bit. We're about to invoke this arrow here, authorization request. There we go. We get the certificate pop up, we can say, but we get the chance to say cancel, right? So now it's gone through this process. Oh yeah, okay, this is a human involved. Make the human authenticate themselves, and then if they authenticate, we're going to implicitly say, well, yes, they're granting authorization. So there's me. Now watch what happens to the URL. There we go. We get redirected to localhost. Okay. We get redirected to localhost because we said redirect URI equals localhost. And it redirects us to localhost. Normally it would be a URL that the client would be listening on to receive that and grab the code from the query parameter that was sent to it. Yes, that's basically the way of saying, hey client, here's your code, have it. Okay, and it passes that in the URL, in the query parameter of the URL that it sends the user back to the client. In this case, I don't have a client. The client is me and the terminal and you. Right? So we get given a code. So far, so good. And the code, like I said, the code is quite a short code. Now, that code is quite short-lived. It's short in length, but it's short in lifetime as well. What's the next thing we have to do with that code? What's the next thing? Let's go back here. The next thing we do is to say, all right, we've got this code. Now, please, dear authorization server, can I have, in exchange for this code, can I have an access token? So that's what we want to do next. And if we look, let's close that. Shall I save these to my fork of Chaim's repo so you can access these later? Let me know let me know in the chat if you want to access these, if they're useful. Let's kill that as well. Let's go back up here. Callback URI. No, that's not there. Where did I see? Oh, there we go. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Fetch token. This whole thing here. Right? This is this bit. So let's do that manually as well. Okay. E says, great, but don't know terminal script. Well, this is a good place to learn. One of the things I find with the terminal is that because we're doing everything manually, we get to see it with our own eyes and touch it with our fingertips and hopefully thereby learn a little better. I don't know whether that's true for everybody, but it's certainly true for me and I know for a number of us here. Because we're doing it piece by piece from the bottom up, I think it's a good way to learn. It's the way I learn anyway. So what we want to do now is the equivalent of this in a script. So let's just open up another thing again. Let's just move that to the top there. Redirect URI, search parameters. What we're doing here. Yeah, there we go. Post, headers. There we go. Let's make that a little bit. No, there we go. I've made this font bigger. I'm struggling a little bit with the size, but that should be all right, actually. Right, okay, so what have we got? We got one request auth grant. So let's call the second one new script to, what should we call it? Request access token. Request access token. There we go. All this is going to be is a curl command. But the curl command is quite complex. So let's build it up bit by bit. And this is just building up the script, Chaim's script here in auth.js. That's building up the same thing. So curl. Let's do it line at a time. What do we? Well, I'm sure many of us know that if we want to specify name value pairs that are being specified here, we can use the -d or the -- data. And if we use -- data or -d, curl will explicitly send automatically the request as a post, not as a get. And that's what we want, right? Because you can see up here, method post. So that's what we want. Oh, actually, there's headers there as well. Let's do the headers first. Yeah, let's have the headers first. Header, content type. Now this is going to be a form, a classic sort of, web form, as it were. So the content type is going to be the dead old-fashioned application x.www.form.url encoded. Okay, that's the content type of the request, but also we're sending a header, accept application JSON. Give me JSON back in the response, please. I would like that. But now we want to send data. What do we want to send? Well, in the first script, we sent a redirect URI, and in fact, we can see the redirect URI here. So let's do that one first. Redirect URI is going to be the same, right? It's going to be URL encoded version of HTTP local host. There we go. Data. Now I'm thinking, has Max spotted something else and is not saying anything deliberately? So that's that one. What else do we need? We need to specify the client ID and the client secret. Remember the client ID and the client secret? There it is. There's the client ID and there's the client secret. It's within the UAA. So remember, we want to specify that there. So we want data client ID, and this thing needs client underscore ID as the query parameter. Client ID equals skvu uaa.client ID, and let's just have another one there, client secret. Client secret. And also we need, what else do we need? Code. Oh, we need the code. Yeah, so we get given the code, don't we? That short code. We need to pass it back here. So we'll say code. And let's use this script to say code equals, we'll say, we'll pass in to this script a value, a parameter, and that'll be the code. And if we don't have the parameter, let's just assume that it's in the code environment variable. Okay, let's be belt and braces. So I'll explain that in a minute. Data, and then what do we need? We've done client ID, we've done client secret, we've done code, done redirect URI. We want grant type. Grant type equals authorization, spelled US way, code. Okay, so far so good. So now all we need is to send that where? Where do we send it? We will send it to the authorization server. How are we doing for time? 8:36. Perfect. Authorization server. So the URL we want is skvu what was it? URI. There, that one. No, not that one. Sorry, uaa.url. There's the authorization server. uaa.url / Now before, if we were, let's look at this one. Let's look at the number 1 there in parallel. That was OAuth authorize. Okay, that's OAuth authorize there. But here, it's OAuth token, which sort of makes sense. First we were saying give us an authorization code. So the path is OAuth authorize that you send that request to. But now we're saying, please give us a token. So the path sort of logically makes sense to be OAuth token, right? So there we go. So there's OAuth token. And I think that's it. Yeah, there we go. So let's run that. Let's run that OAuth token. I got rid of that by mistake. Let's just put an echo on the front so it'll just print it out rather than do anything else, right? So if I say to, so we get all that. We've got the header, content type, Don't worry about this missing quotes because that's just the way that it's expanded. So we're missing the code. So if I say the code is banana, so we got curl, we send the header, we send another header, we send redirect URI equals localhost URL encoded, we send the client ID, and we send the encoded secrets, and that's it, right? So now let's try that with the code that we already had. Have we still got the code somewhere? There's the code. Perfect. So if we say to request access token code, because we got the code from, I've closed it actually. We've got the code from the first phase. Oh, I need to get rid of the echo. What happened there? Curl. Seems all right. What's going on? Why didn't it do anything? Let's put a verbose in. Ooh. Let me zoom it as well for a second. Request access token. Oh, what? OAuth token. What did I put? Because we got there, what we're getting there is a moved permanently. Is that a 301? Yeah, 301 moved permanently. What did I do wrong? VI2 OAuth token. What was the thing there? Was that the right? OAuth token. auth URL, let's just do that for skvu echo skvu uaa.url OAuth token. Ah, wait, what? Wait, what? I don't want to URL encode the actual URL. What a fool. Okay. Let's just see if that works. There we go. There we go. Got an error, but it's a good error. What I was doing just then was I used skvu to URL encode the value of the authorization server URL. But this is the URL that we're giving to curl. Curl, go here. And of course, that's no good. So, it didn't work. But now it doesn't work in a different way, but in a good way. Let's just get rid of the verbose for a second so we can just see what we want to see. We've got this code that we're given. So we're now saying, please exchange this code for an access token. But what it's saying is, let's just JQ that, actually. Invalid grant, invalid authorization code. Why is that invalid? Because probably, it doesn't tell us, but probably it's expired. Remember, I said it's short, but it's also got a short lifetime. Martin says, delays. Oh, we got some delays. Helmut, you got no delays. That's okay. Cool. Okay, good to know. Martin says, did anybody try this with doing these flows against sub-accounts using IAS as an IDP? Oh, that's a good. I haven't done that. Has anybody? Let us know in the chat if anybody's done that. It'd be quite interesting to do that as well. Once we've got the basics understood, we could try that. We could then expand, right, Martin? Perfect. Okay, so why don't we go and get a new code and then plug it in as quick as we can. Okay. In fact, what we'll do is we'll save that into token.json. Okay. We'll save that into there. So we'll do the one, go and get a new authorization code. As in, we're going to do this bit again. Oh, we wanted this, don't we? So Brave CLI, there we go, that one. We don't need that anymore, do we? No, let's get rid of that, There we go, Brave CLI, Go and open it again. Cancel that, log in, get the thing. There we go, there's the code, let's close that. And now to use that code. So let's have a look. Let's just make that a bit smaller so we can look at it in Vim. Vim C set no wrap. I think I've got no wrap set at the moment, but anyway, what do we call it? Token.js. Ah, okay. It's all on one continuous line. So let's just pipe that into JQ. There we go. Perfect. And we get what we're expecting. We get an access token. There. What type of token is it? It's a bearer token, as in it's a token to be used in the authorization header with the word bearer on the front, basically. We also, to Helmut's original question, get a refresh token. We also get expires in. I remember this number from, when we did OAuth before, 43199. I guess that's a second after. So that's 43200 divided by 60. That was in seconds. 60 seconds. 720 minutes. 720 minutes divided by 60 is 12 hours. Okay, so this token, this access token, is valid for 12 hours. Can you please do PS-A Linux? Quit. PS-A. Tmux, outer, Tmux inner. Does that help, E? I'm not sure what you want. But anyway, there we go. So now let's try and use the access token, but then let's try refreshing it, right? So was it to Helmut? I can't remember. Was it to Helmut or was it to Mark? I think it was to Helmut, wasn't it? So let's try now going to the root endpoint of the SAP Graph surface area, which is in my credentials file in the URI thing. So I can say curl -h for header. Let's do that. So header authorization. Let's do that there. Authorization. Oh, there we go. Where are we? There. Authorization. There. Where are we? Where are we? Where are we? There we go. Yeah. It's curl minus header authorization. Authorization bearer SKV token access token. So we get the access token value from the token file, right? There we go. And let's go to SKV URI. Is it? URI, yeah, URI. Let's do that. Let's see what happens. So we're now saying, please access this thing, URI, and authenticate that access request with the access token that we've just got from this little dance here, the thing that we were given here. Okay, so now let's go to this diagram here, this other diagram. So now we're about to do this, right? To go and access this protected resource. Ooh, there we go. We get some stuff. And in fact, if we remember, V1, what was it that Chaim was going to? Customer quote. Yeah, there we go. SAP ODM sales. And we got the V1 as well. So that's what we did. V1 SAP.ODM sales customer quote top equals 1. That'll do. There we go. We're now accessing the protected resources. That's this thing that's just come back there. So 8:48. We've got time. Just trying to refresh, haven't we? Okay. So, oh, it was Mark. Sorry, Mark. Why the code length is so short? I don't know. I guess it doesn't need to be, because it's so short-lived. I don't know how short-lived it is. Clearly, it's a few minutes, isn't it? Maybe it doesn't need to be unique forever. It just needs to be. I don't know. It's a good question, Sam. Really, I'll find out. It was Mark. Sorry, Helmut. Sorry, it was Mark. Right. So Helmut says piping into JQ inside Vim is great. Good tip. Yes. Yeah. Yep. Cool. Thanks for noticing that, Helmut. Yes. Perfect. So let's try and do the refresh. And in fact, refresh grant type equal. There we go. Look. Grant type equals refresh token, and refresh token is that, and the client ID and the client secret. So let's try that. Okay, let's try and ask for a refreshed access token. Should we do that? What should we call it? New script 3 request refresh access token. In fact, why don't we copy 2 to 3? Because it's almost going to be the same, isn't it? It's the same sort of thing. We're sending an HTTP post with the parameter. In fact, there, look, we're sending an HTTP post with the parameters in the payload, in the body, not in the query parameter of the URL. The content type is application x www form URL encoded. So that's still good. We're asking for JSON. Might as well send that as well. We don't need to send a redirect URI, do we? We need to send a grant type. We need to send a refresh token. We need to send a client ID, and we need to send a client secret. So client ID is that. Client secret is that. Same thing. We don't need to send a code. The grant type is literally the string refresh token there. Refresh token. It's still, I think this assumes, or this, I think OAuth is just a convention in the path. So it is to the same place, right? Let's just double check that. Grant type equals refresh token OAuth token. Refreshing access token. There we go. Yeah, post OAuth token, grant type, refresh token, blah, blah, blah. Okay, cool. Okay, so that's it. OAuth token, refresh token. But we also need to send the refresh token itself, don't we? As in this thing. And remember, the refresh token is in our auth file, isn't it? Sorry, no, in our token file. C set no wrap token JQ refresh token. There we go, refresh token. So we need to send data refresh token equals and because this is URL encoded form, we've got to do the SKV URL encoded. That's okay. We might get an error, mightn't we? Let's try that anyway. Maybe my thing doesn't work, but let's try it. Token refresh token. Let's just see. Quit that out of there. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Let's tell you what we'll do. We'll try and say skvu token from the token file, get the refresh token. Yeah, okay, so what we'll do is I'll do it a different way. skvu, we want the skvu skv token, and we'll URL encode that. There we go. Hopefully that'll work. Let's try that. URL encode the result of calling skv token refresh token. Perfect. Doesn't need encoding anyway, by the looks of things. Anyway, okay, fine. So, are we ready to try this? Are we ready to try this? Save that. 3. Okay. Seemed to do something, didn't it? So now, let's open up this again. Open up another thing. Refreshed. JQ of that. There we go. We get a new token. This is different, isn't it? So, that's how you refresh your access tokens. Let's try this access token. Okay, let's try this access token. Let's do that, that, and now what did we do? We did a curl with the header, but this time let's go and get the access token from the refreshed JSON, which is where our refreshed access token is, and see if we still get some data. There we go. There we go. So hopefully, does that cover, Mark, what you were asking right at the start of this? I think it does. We've got a refresh token. Mark says, would you store the refresh token in the session or in local storage or in a cookie, or what is easiest to do? Oh, that's a good question. I think it depends. Notice, I do remember when we looked at, let's go into here and have a look at it. When we looked at Chaim's code, he was storing the access token, not the refresh token. He was storing the access token in a cookie, wasn't he? Get token, no, cookie. Oh, there we go, there. Go and get the token, fetch the token, and store it in a cookie. Now, I can understand him doing that because A, why not? It's a way of sort of not storing it, but still having it. Get sent to the client, get sent back. But it's probably not, for use outside of this sort of context. I would, it feels to me like a session level, a user specific, not user, sorry, not user specific, a session level thing. Actually, no, maybe it doesn't. I suppose it depends. It depends. I don't know. Yeah, so let's talk about that. Yeah, the previous token is still valid Samuel. I suppose it depends on your implementation, whether your client program, whether your equivalent. Oh, I don't know where it is now. Where is it? Where's the diagram? Whether your client also has a relationship with users, so you can store it at the user session level. Because what you wouldn't want to do, if you think about what, Strava, I'm thinking, what have I done recently that I've had to say, yes, I grant access to this, go through that flow, the resource owner, me, yes, I grant Garmin access to Strava or Strava access to Garmin, whatever it was. I don't want to be bothered by that every time. So we do need to store this information. We do need to store long-term the access token, but more importantly, the refresh token, right? And the client ID and the client secret, of course, the client has anyway, because that's part of the client's nature. I would prefer a graph client that takes care of all token handling instead of me having to do it. Yes, I would too, Mark. I would too, but we can say that now, hopefully, knowing what it would be doing for us when it's doing that. So there we go. We took the whole time, didn't we, going through that? I hope that was okay. I hope that was okay. So why don't we stop here? The hour is almost upon us. Yeah. Are there any more questions before we finish? I've still got a bit of biscuit left, actually. Are there any more questions? Was that clear? Was that helpful? Let's just recap. We went through the first part. Where's the thing? Where are we? Don't want that. Oop. We requested an authorization code, as in grant me those authorization code. We use that to request the access token, and we then refresh the access token using the refresh token that we got in the same gift box that the access token was in. So if anybody's wondering about these credentials, don't worry, they're going to be invalidated as soon as we finish this, so that's all cool. So yeah, thank you very much. And thank you for all your questions. Why, hello, Andrew, you got the time wrong. Never mind, Andrew. You're welcome even for the last minute. So thanks all for watching. Sorry, Mark, your root question is not answered. Which one was your root question? About where to store it? Or what? I can't remember. I think the answer to that, my answer is it depends. Samuel is saying I'm thinking about using AppRouter instead of custom code. Oh yes, I think AppRouter. Remember, we used AppRouter in the TechEd developer keynote, not to inject an access token and do that sort of stuff, but to inject an authorization header using the API key. Okay, so yeah, the AppRouter would be a nice way of doing it as well. Cool. Okay. Well, have a great Friday. Have a great weekend, and yeah, I'll see you probably next week. Might be taking a break next week. I'm not sure. Oh, the full life cycle. We did the refresh, or is that not what you meant? Oh, where to store it? Okay, where to store it. Let's talk about that next time. Until then, arrivederci.